Okay, yeah, thank you. It's really great to be here. As was said, I've done a few talks like this at Barcamp and places like that, but it's my first time coming and first time talking at Code Harbour, and given that I have a live demonstration later, could end up being Code Shipwreck, but you know, we'll have to see. You have to just kind of bear with me. So I'll introduce myself first before we get into it, and I'll keep it fairly brisk. So that's me. I used to have purple hair. I'm an assistant lecturer at the University of Kent, and I do a lot of research there as well in computational creativity. So I work with a lot of AI models, specifically looking at how we can be creative with them. I'm also a self-proclaimed educational performer, which is a term I made up for this stuff when I come in to do talks about things that don't need talks written about. And I'm also a quirky stand-up comedian as well. So if any of my jokes don't land, I need a career change. But yeah, before I sort of start talking about some of the theory behind this, I wanted to start off my live demonstration because it's going to take a while to do all the processing. So what I need from all of you for something later in the talk is I need a topic for a PowerPoint presentation. Yes?
The sex life of baboons.
Can we have something a little bit more general, like baboons would be good, something a bit less specific for this, something kind of a single word topic.
Darts.
What was that? Ducks?
Darts.
Darts? Darts, okay, fair enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm briefly going to hit run on this system, and I'm going to see whether it's actually going to work for me today, because it is hit or miss whether it works or not. So that's now running. We'll be checking back in on that later. But basically my talk is about making presentations and changing the way we make presentations. And I think it should be more specifically called using AI to make presentations. And I first wanted to talk about why I'm qualified to talk about this, because you don't know me, you don't know why I'm qualified to talk about this. So, as I said, I've been a PowerPoint enthusiast for a number of years. I've been making PowerPoint presentations since, I was probably about 7 years old. So, absolutely love it. I then do stand-up comedy routines using PowerPoint. That's my medium of comedy. I've been doing that for about 2 years now. It's very silly, and this is probably my biggest qualification right here. I actually proposed to my fiance via PowerPoint presentation at the end of last year. They actually didn't know I was going to say that in this talk, and then got those, so there we go.
Yes.
We got the ring, so there we go. Clearly it works, right? But and also I have actually graduated beyond PowerPoint presentations, and I now have ascended to a higher form of presentation medium, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. And I think taking all of those qualifications, especially probably that third one, I think it would not be remiss of me to say that I am the most qualified presentation maker in the world. That's not an understatement, and that is why I'm qualified to talk to you about changing the way we make presentations. So, what is the future of making presentations? That's really what I want to talk about. And the truth is, I don't know. To be completely honest, I actually have no idea, right? So that's the end of the talk. Thanks for listening. No, wait, it's not. I have a few ideas about how we can make presentations in the future, and I've come up with a bit of a solution, a methodology, if you would, to use these modern AI tools to make presentations easier. So I'm going to start at the beginning with something called Reveal.js, which is a open source HTML framework that allows you to create presentations. So I didn't make it, it was made by someone else. It was made by this guy, Hakeem El-Hattab, and it basically is ideal for computer scientists, programmers, and people who like making things more difficult for themselves, but in a cool way. So I've actually brought, it's also pretty good for me because I like making presentations. That was going to be the Reveal.js homepage. But basically, this is the presentation that you're currently watching, or in its code form, using Reveal.js. A little peek under the hood. Basically, it's a way of using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to create presentations instead of using PowerPoint. What's good about that is all of it is just text, which means you can write it with Python scripts and specifically large language models. Speaking of which, large language models. So basically, I think we all know what large language models are, but if you don't, I'll briefly go through it. They're text-based models trained on a huge data set. They're designed to produce an output that is inspired from the data it's trained on, but original. That's their idea. Sometimes it isn't original, but that's beside the point. And they're black box systems, which is something that was talked about in the other talk. We don't know what happens inside them. We can just read the input and the output. So that's going to be our solution to generating text for presentations. But a presentation is not all about text, as you'll know. We also need images, which is where diffusion models come in. Please do stop me if I'm racing too quickly through this. I'm trying to keep it brief so we can look at the practical stuff. So diffusion models are basically a type of generative model that generates images, and it does it with a three-step process. Step one is it takes training data and destroys it by successively adding Gaussian noise. So it basically takes an existing image and it destroys it with noise till it's completely unrecognizable. It then reverses that process to learn how to restore images from that destroyed noisy state. And then you give it a random sample of noise, and it can then repeat that process to produce you a completely new image. I realise that's a lot of words and very abstract, so I put on a picture. So you have a very normal picture of a cat, and you gradually destroy it more and more using noise until, as you can see on the right-hand side, it's not at all recognisable. And then it learns how to do it the other way, so it gets progressively clearer from the destroyed output. And then when you give it a random selection of noise, it then can produce an image at the end. So that's going to be how we generate the images for our slides. So there's one other thing that I came across when I was writing the script for this that I think is really interesting. AI is unpredictable. LLM outputs are unpredictable. ChatGPT is pretty good, so if you ask it to format things a certain way, to write it in a certain way, it generally will. But some of these more open source local models, which is what I'll be using, are very unpredictable. Sometimes they give us information that we don't want. So for example, here we go. I asked it to give me a title for a PowerPoint slide, and it gave me all of this. Sure, let me work that out for you. Here is a title that will suit your presentation. That's not needed. That's not useful to us. And it's just going to get in the way. If we plug that directly into a presentation, it's going to not look like a PowerPoint slide, right? Or it's going to have a really long title. So I had to come up with how to approach this. So, as I said, it's useless and it gets in the way of the desired output. So I decided to use unique substrings, as you can see here, an example of ampersand, %, a unique substring that can be used to identify the desirable parts of the output. So, in other words, you can ask the model to start the slide title using that little substring. And what you can then do is, in Python, you can then split the response from the LLM based on that unique substring into an array of two sides, and you just take the side that you want. It's that simple. It doesn't always work that nicely in practice. It can be a bit unpredictable, as we'll probably talk about later. But that's sort of the way of doing it. So I actually put the code on here. So little method there that can do that. It just identifies what part of the presentation you're talking about and the corresponding substring. Each part has to have a different substring. And it then takes that and it just takes the first part of the array, the second part of the array. So it takes out that useless fluff at the start and leaves you with the desirable at the end. It's not quite as smooth as that. Sometimes it puts the ampersand in weird places. Sometimes it won't put an ampersand at all. I've had to put a lot of catch-alls in my code for if it doesn't put an ampersand, it doesn't put one of the substrings. And that's basically the idea behind this, is we combine those three elements. We take large outputs from large language models, we take outputs from diffusion models, and we use this substring to sort of fine-tune, to kind of cultivate the bits that we want. And we give a final output, and we plug it into a reveal.js template. So there's all the useless HTML stuff that goes into setting up those presentations. We just shove the desirable stuff in the middle of it, where it needs to go, and we write all of that to a HTML file. And in theory, that then means we're done. Now, what's really exciting is my next bit was going to be, does this actually work? And do some practical demonstrations. And literally, it has just finished on my other laptop doing the prompt from earlier, which is a promising sign. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly switch laptops, or going to try to switch laptops quickly, so that we can have a look at the output that we got from our prompt at the start. So if I just plug that in, hopefully that will then pop up on the screen. I'll plug it into the wrong thing. It's like a costume change, but for the tech world. It's quite exciting. Okay. Oh, that looks a bit weird. So I have my code over here that I should be able to sort of drag onto the screen, hopefully. There we go. So this is the code that I've used to generate a script for us. So as you see, a lot of different methods, a lot of different stuff that goes into this. So basically, the bit we're interested in is all the way down here. Through this, I'm not a very good programmer. This is messy as hell. But basically, we want this section where we're essentially using this to generate things, and we are writing that generation to a file using the framework of the reveal.js presentation. But that's not the bit you care about. What you care about is seeing the actual output of it. So this is where we find out if it works. So I've got a little output folder that contains all the stuff required for a reveal.js presentation. So over here in the index.html file is sort of your base setup for reveal.js. So it's just a HTML file, and you create slides using section tags, and you basically, so for example here you have slide 1, slide 2, etc. So what I've then done is I've taken our output from that, which is this. So this is our output of what we generated using that prompt. So as you can see, just a couple of things before we kind of go into it. We've got an image there, the image tag, I realize it's quite small, and we've got some H1 and some paragraph tags. Now, I'm a bit worried. I asked it to generate 3 slides. We will see whether it actually worked. So if we load this up in our presentation here, we have a PowerPoint slide, completely generated by AI. Applause? Any? No? Okay, thank you. Thank you. This is as good as it gets, right? So if you don't applaud this, I don't know what I'm doing. So yeah, so we asked it to generate something about darts, which it did. So it's got a title. Darts is a game of skill and strategy. It's a good title. Darts is a popular sport played by 50 million people, so it's got a bit of a fact there. I get it to generate like 2 or 3 facts per slide as kind of a stock amount. And it's not just one slide. Hopefully it will work on my clicker. No, it won't. So it's not just one slide. We can move over to the next slide with a different image and a different set of facts. Darts is a popular pub game that originated in Europe. It's been played for centuries. No idea if this is true. It mentioned about the idea of facts. We have no idea if this is true. But, you know, if you were going to give a school presentation about darts, who's going to go and check it, you know? So there we go, and it's given us a different image, which is really cool. And there we go, that's not got at all correctly, has it? So this is what happens when I was talking about the substrings, right? The desirable outcomes. So as you can see, darting across the board, brilliant. Absolutely nailed it. I hope you find it helpful. Clearly, it tacked on a bit at the end, even though my prompt says not to, and it says keep it to under 12 words. I guess it has. But then again, we're back to our facts again. This is quite good because usually it tends to repeat the facts. I haven't got it to have context yet for generating new facts. So actually, that's quite good that it was sort of original. But as you can see, the image was just completely messed up. And there's a blank slide that I put at the end. That's it. So that was a completely live generated thing for all of you. And if you don't believe me, if you think this is some kind of magical trickery, which arguably it is if you're not a computer scientist. But there's a terminal for the image generation. So I can talk, if you want to hear more about how I've actually set up these local models, that's a separate thing. But I'm basically using a system with a web UI that has an API that allows me to call it. And then if that's that, and I can also bring over this as well, which is something I was actually recommended at Barcamp, which essentially is a locally hosted server with Llama 2 in it, which has generated all of the images, all of the text, sorry. So that's kind of what we've ended up with as a result of that. If I open up the terminal, you can see what it's been generating as well. So you can see to generate the image at the end, it took a summary of the title and the content and generated a 5-word image prompt based on that, and somehow got a woman in a dress or something. I don't know. What was that?
When you bring the dress to a curve, you make a dart.
Ah, interesting. Okay, that's interesting. But as you can see, the other thing that I've had to do in this is create a check. I think this is quite cool, where if it hasn't got the substring in it in the generation, because unless it's ChatGPT, it doesn't follow your instructions, it just regenerates the response again. So we'll just keep going until it works out. So as this does take quite a while, I've brought another couple of things to demonstrate it. So let's see if I can find it. I think it was this one. So this one over here was one I generated about monkeys. That tends to be my default one, is I tend to generate things about monkeys because I think they look funny in the pictures. So this one is about monkeys. So that was just one slide there. Let's see if we can also do this one. And we've also got monkeys. I'm taking the image out of the directory. But this one is quite cool because every single slide says that monkeys have opposable thumbs as the first fact. So I think that's quite interesting. So that's kind of the live demonstration that didn't completely go wrong, which is remarkable. So I'm just going to switch back to my presentation because I'm aware I've only probably got about 5 minutes before we're going to want to do a Q&A. But I just want to talk a little bit about what I want to do with this. Because we've had one talk about that's been quite practical, quite useful, and this obviously is not. This is quite random. So, yeah, what do I want to do with this to take it further, basically? So, my first thing is to increase the diversity in slide layout. As you can see, it was just image, title, text. Because of HTML, I can build some like layouts and stuff that you can pick from. I could create like a dictionary, a list of layouts that you can pick from, so we could have some diversity in this. I'd also quite like to incorporate a system for guiding the topic of the presentation. So basically, instead of just saying something about darts and have it generate 3 slides about darts, I want it to take a topic, pick like 5 topics, subtopics of that, and then generate those, so you get a bit of a narrative, so you get a bit of kind of a story, so it actually feels more like a presentation. And because it's JavaScript, you can use JavaScript listeners. So Google.js has a lot of listeners that you can use to essentially allow you to time things based on events in the presentation. So for example, if I created, say, 3 slides at the start, I could set it to every time you move a slide, generate a new slide, and then refresh the page, which is a web page, which some of you might have clocked it, would give me an infinitely generating presentation, which I think is everything that all of us wanted in our lives. And I think that's the end game from my perspective as the greatest presentation maker in the world, is to have the infinitely generating presentation. I was talking earlier today, the idea of having it on a server and having it run and generate a new slide every day, and have it move topics, traverse topics, and see how long it would take to return to the original topic. If it just kept doing a new topic on each slide. So this is less practical, it's a lot more research and kind of experimental. But I mean, just that is enough potential to warrant the 20 odd hours I've put into this. The idea that one day I might be able to stand here and present infinitely without a single bit of work on my part, except the code. So yeah, thank you for listening to my presentation. It's not AI generated, that's a disclaimer. When I do talks about AI presentations, my presentation is not AI generated. But I think we've got about 5-10 minutes or so to answer any questions. Yeah, thank you so much.
I've got a question, but I do need to do a bit of explaining. So for anyone that hasn't been to Barcamp, one of the things that happens at the end is we do something called slideshow karaoke, where basically someone says a random topic, and then we go on, I think it's LinkedIn slides, find a slideshow, and then this random person has to do a random talk on something they've never seen before. It's absolutely amazing.
I had to do it about a dentist, not this year, but the year before. I had to do it about a dentist system. It was like a system where you text people to say you've brushed your teeth. That was an eventful day in my life. Yeah.
So my question is, could you apply that to Barcamp? Is that
absolutely. So yes, this could, a few iterations down the line, this could definitely act as a PowerPoint karaoke machine or slideshow karaoke machine. Either in the way I talked about with picking a topic and then branching out from there, but also in the sense of I could get it to randomly pick topics, so you could be presenting a story and then it's flip topics on you, which tends to happen in random PowerPoints you find on the internet. But you can do that, and also I do research with AI and stand-up comedy and jokes, which is a whole separate talk if you're interested. So I can incorporate humour elements into this as well in the way that I'm engineering my prompts to make the content funny, outside of just the general absurdity of the whole thing. So yeah, definitely, absolutely. I'll just work my way around.
So with presentations, with animations and the speakers, there's quite a big raw sound, there's quite a big thing with presentations. Are you going to look to incorporate slide animation?
Yes, this was something I was unsure how to sort of address. So it would be quite easy to incorporate simple animations into this. So the way Google.js does animations is it's a class that you apply to an HTML tag. The class is called fragment, and it basically says that it applies when you click it. So that's how I do all the animations in this. There you can also use any animation CSS library to get more cooler animations. So applying just a fragment would be really easy. When I take the bullet point, I would then just, where I've got the, it's set up as a paragraph tag, by default, I would just do paragraph class equals fragment and incorporate that. Anything more complicated would require a language model that understands how the animation system works, which is something I don't want to do, but crossed my mind of creating a language model that's trained on just Reveal.js presentations. That's a lot of work. Originally for this talk, because I originally used OpenAI stuff, but that's expensive with the API. So now I switched to local models. Originally I was going to do it with a custom trained neural network. It wouldn't be as sophisticated as this, but it would have done the job. So definitely I could train a simple neural network on an animation scheme and get it to produce that. But that's not currently top of my list at the moment of things to incorporate, but definitely something that would be really cool later down the line. Yeah.
Could you reverse engineer presentation, so feed a local presentation, but reverse engineer those into the HTML code, so then it would be able to randomly generate from that instead of just creating a dictionary?
Sorry, what do you mean?
So if there was a way of reverse engineering what a presentation slide graphic was into the HTML, then you could feed multiple ones of those into it and then reverse engineer so it would be able to generate randomly from...
So as in, are you saying like slide layouts
from
predefined slide layouts, pass it in and then use
instead of having a dictionary of predefined ones, you fed it loads of general slides.
And again, that would be something
from the general slides.
So that would be something that again you'd need something that's trained to do it in some way. So you would pass it in a bunch of example slide layouts, and it would do it. I'm interested for whether ChatGPT could do it. Because I think ChatGPT can write Reveal.js code, which is quite cool. But again, it costs money to use the API, and my Barcamp talk costs about £3, which doesn't sound like much, but if I kept doing it, it would have been a bit difficult. But yeah, again, at the moment, it's just for the variety. Having predefined ones is a simple way of achieving a variable result. It would be nice to be able to sort of interpret what type of slide it is to choose what layout to go with, but I'm not entirely sure how I would do that to start with.
I think for comedy factor it's fine just for it to be random anyway to start with.
You
have to deal with it as it comes
again,
up.
and I think certainly the first task is to deal with some of the bugs. The fact that it only works 50% of the time is a bit of a problem. That's mostly my bad coding, more so than anything else. But also the fact that that substring method is, I think, reasonably clever or intuitive, but not ideal. It's the same method that I would use to create the infinitely one, because of the fact it has HTML appended to the start and end before you even get to the slides. You'd need a marker, like a commented marker in the HTML to identify where the slide was up to, add in the other thing, and then put the rest of it back on. It'd be like doing a bit of a surgery, like cut it down the middle, separate it out, put the slide in, and then can join it back together. So the substring method is nice, but it's not flawless, so that would be my first sort of thing to tackle.
I was going to say, with the substring, if you looked at, obviously with prompts you can sometimes get it to produce output more precisely.
Yes.
We try sort of prompt engineering so that you can
So that's what I have set up. So I have a very specific prompt that starts very simple of generate a fact about this topic, but then has a bunch of other stuff after it saying how to lay out the response, what substring to use. A problem I was running into literally before this talk, and I had to add in a thing before this talk earlier on, is in that recursive, in that thing where it keeps generating response until it has that substring to use so that it doesn't create an error, it was going infinitely because it would just never generate that substring because it was being difficult for some reason. Because it only does it on certain prompts. Some prompts just work fine. It's very random. So what I did was I created a system that appends a sentence at the end to the prompt. Every time it tries to regenerate it, it adds a thing onto the prompt saying, make sure you put the substring in. So if it ran like 10 times, it would then say that 10 times, and eventually it seems to get the gist.
Have you looked at how how many times on average it needs to add that bit onto the end of the sentence? I'm just
yeah,
how
so-
you're building the machine.
So I've had a little look, and it tends to be 1 in 3 generations fails, which isn't too bad. I need to create a proper logging system that isn't what I was doing in the terminal to be able to actually look through the output of what it's doing and how many iterations it's doing. But yeah, about 1 in 3. Very often, like, either the title will mess up and then the content will be fine, or the very last generation of the content will mess up. I generated 3 slides for this. If I try to generate 20, even though it's doing the same thing each time, it will eventually get to a point where
Why does it start from scratch for each slide?
So the way it's stored is I have a dictionary that contains a value, a key for what the type of content is, whether it's a slide title, bullet point, or an image, and then I've got a field for the content. And those are stored in the dictionary. The dictionary is then stored inside a list that represents a slide, and then a list is then stored inside another list, which represents the presentation as a whole. So it does do each slide sort of individually, but it does the images last. So when you get it to do like 5 slides, it stores it all in a dictionary, and then it grabs each slide out of the dictionary to generate the images at the end. Because that was the way I coded it for some reason, instead of doing it as I went along. I think because I did all the text and then did the images, so I think the images just kind of got appended on. So it's by no means efficient. But it does work sometimes, which is really good. Does anyone have any last questions?